Hello. Today I will be discussing the intersection of criminal justice reform and environmental justice, specifically the increasing vulnerability of incarcerated communities in the southern United States who experience greater neglect and mistreatment during natural disasters such as hurricane and flooding. As climate change has impacted the severity and frequency of natural disasters, policies and procedures to acknowledge and care for the well-being of inmates has yet to be developed. The United States, infamous for having the highest rates of incarceration in the world, allocates authority and management of its prisons and jails to state authorities, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and private operations. Each entity has their own standards of decision-making and management, as incarcerated individuals are stripped of their own decision-making capacities and autonomy. These aforementioned entities are responsible for the health and well-being of inmates, as decided by Youngberg v. Romeo in 1982. In regard to demographics, U.S. prison structures and populations are highly concentrated in the South, with the largest populations in Louisiana, where 719 people are incarcerated for every 100,000. Based on discriminatory policing, pervasive racism and campaigns such as the war on drugs, and the functioning of the U.S. criminal justice system as a contemporary system of racial control, incarcerated populations are also overwhelmingly Black. Further, exorbitant bail fees have ensured that only the wealthy of America can avoid incarceration. Meanwhile, prolonged trial periods have ensured that 76% of the prison population in the U.S. have not yet been convicted of any crime, leaving thousands subject to a penal system despite our common mantra of innocent until proven guilty. To the right, you will see an example of the distribution of prisons in Texas and Florida and the concentration of infrastructures that have experienced severe flooding from hurricanes in the last few years. You will also notice that several of these prisons are well within regions that are likely to be submerged due to rising sea levels. There are no federally mandated procedures for states to follow in preparation for and during disasters. Thus, evacuation efforts in light of natural disasters will vary state by state. As such, numerous prisons are never evacuated, even when there is a declared state of emergency that requires the evacuation of civilians projected to be in the path of a hurricane or flood. The first egregious modern example can be traced to the treatment of inmates at Orleans Parish Prison during Hurricane Katrina. Inmates were locked in their cells, abandoned, without food or water, experienced flooding of sewage water up to their necks, and several days later were then evacuated to a highway without protection from the sun or extreme heat. Though procedures in New Orleans specifically have shifted, few lessons have been learned nationwide. We've seen consistent neglect from states and federal authorities during Hurricanes Irma, Florence, Maria, and Harvey. This artistic rendering is based off the testimony of Deirdre McDonald, who is currently incarcerated at the Carroll Young Complex in Texas. She and fellow inmates were not evacuated during Harvey and were not allowed to have contact with their community networks outside the prison, their lawyers included. As the structure flooded, they were also responsible for tending to fellow inmates who were pregnant, disabled, or experiencing health crises. In understanding capacities to intervene, I do not think there is an operable short-term or long-term dichotomy. To instill justice, there has to be analysis of the systemic roots of vulnerability in the communities and means to reduce it. In this case, there are policies and procedures that remove people from situations of vulnerability and incarceration entirely. These symptomatic interventions to the right can address the neglect of the state and reduce hardship of inmates within these structures, but they will not break the cycle of injustice for incarcerated communities. In our current system of mass incarceration, we have removed the personhood and decision-making capacities of inmates. We cannot purport the notion of community resilience or climate resilience when we do not give a community the autonomy to be resilient. And we certainly cannot trust the individuals that perpetuate and uphold a system of mass incarceration to care for the well-being and dignity of incarcerated communities. Injustice is never singular, and it does not occur in a vacuum. An injustice can inform and exacerbate another injustice. Criminal justice reform can be one step to greater ensuring we reinforce environmental justice in the United States. Thank you.